What secret did you learn about someone after many years of friendship? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I was on a team in high school for 4 years, got pretty close with the other girls on the team, and we all hung out all of the time. We decided to go bowling together, and one of these girls, who we had spent hours a week with for years and talked about everything under the sun with, showed up with her own shoes, gloves, bag, and bowling ball and crushed us all with a near professional score. She had never mentioned bowling to any of us, even once, even when we were making plans to go bowling. Story 2. My ex-BF had a close friend who we weren't all aware had been a competition league bowler at one point. I wasn't there for this, but my ex and his buddies went to a local bowling alley for beer and to play a game one night. Their buddy got loosey-goosey and began busting out some of his bowling tricks, and it caused a small crowd to come watch. This girl in the crowd pushed him aside and began outdoing all of his tricks. If he did a spin and shot the ball between his legs, she'd do 2 spins and shoot the ball between her legs backwards, that sort of thing. Yeah, they've been married for almost a decade now. Story 3. When my best friend died, I learned that I never knew her at all. She was a pathological liar. She had told me that she was born in New Zealand and moved to the US when she was 2. Nope, born and raised in New Jersey. She told me her middle name was different than on her obituary. The craziest lie was that she had a younger sister that was hit by a car as a toddler and died. She had a tattoo of roses that she swore was for her little sister. There was a specific day in November every year where she'd fall apart crying. Said it was her sister's date of death. That sister never existed. Story 4. That happened to me before too, but not that bad. I found out that my former best friend was lying to me about everything. She told me that she got laid off from her job because it was during COVID. So I lent her $200. Come to find out, she had been fired from the bank for fudging numbers. She also lied to me about why she and her ex-boyfriend split up. She told me that she had no relatives in our state, so her friends were the only family she had. Found out later that she has a mom, aunt, and a grandma here. The worst part was that her and I used to work together at one time. She also got fired from that job. When she was terminated, she told HR a whole bunch of lies and got me involved. Story 5. Found out that a longtime golf buddy of mine was a professional ballroom dance teacher in his previous years. Guy is 300 plus pounds and just didn't give off ballroom dancer vibes. My wife of 10 years used to work for Arthur Murray Dance Schools and didn't believe he knew how to dance, so she invited him and his wife over for dinner. Boy, was she wrong. Golf buddy twirled her, dipped her, the whole 9 yards as both myself and his wife stood there with our jaws on the floor. After going through 7 different dances with my wife, he twirled her one last time towards me and said, "Told you so." We had a great dinner, and I learned something new about the 300 lb Samoan that I golf with every weekend. Story 6. When my housemate and I newly started living together, I noticed a letter from a publisher in our mail. I come from a publishing background, so I recognized the publisher, but I assume any other random person wouldn't have clocked it. I asked her why she got mail from a publisher, and she confided in me that she gets royalties from a book by a very well-known children's author. Apparently, they met at her school when she was a kid, and he liked her stories of her immigration experience, and she ended up basically consulting with him to write a book. She kept in contact with him for years after that. It blows my mind, especially since this is a big author, and she just happens to have a book published with him. Story 7. I found out that one of my best friends used to be a competitive figure skater. We'd been friends for years, and she never mentioned it. One day, we were talking about childhood hobbies, and she casually mentioned she used to compete at a national level. I was shocked. She even showed me some old photos and videos. It was so cool to see a completely different side of her. Someone I dated years ago was the same. She was ranked in the top 5 figure skaters nationally when she was younger. I didn't find out until we visited her parents' house and I saw rows of medals and trophies. Story 8. In my youth, I learned my friend of 6 or 7 years was a Jehovah's Witness. I had no idea. Sitting there talking to him one day, and I asked him if he was ready for Christmas, and he said no, and that's when he told me he was Jehovah's Witness. I had no idea. Later, I found out that he was the reason why every time the Jehovah's Witnesses went up and down the street in our neighborhood, they always skipped my house. Story 9. It wasn't really a secret, so I don't know if it qualifies. But I have a work friend we've known each other for years. Grab beers together, hang outside of work from time to time. Turns out we've been in each other's orbits since birth. He mentioned his mom knowing someone I knew via my mom. We started going through contacts. We'd attended the same schools, just different classes that never blended. His brother dated my cousin's best friend. We'd worked for the same companies, just a mix of one of coming in as the other was leaving, or the company was big enough for paths to never cross. We'd lived in the same neighborhoods multiple times. We had the same favorite restaurant in one place. We just had different regular days to go. Story 10. I had a similar but different instance with a friend. We became friends in high school. We've been friends for about 2 years before my father ever met this friend. Immediately upon meeting, my father, very seriously and stone-faced, goes, "Michael, how's your mother?" My friend Mike goes, "She's off her rocker as usual." "How have you been?" My father says, "Much better nowadays," grabs my shoulder and tells me to follow him. Proceeds to ask me how I know Mike. Then explains that he used to watch Mike often when we were younger because Mike's mom was best friends with his psycho ex-girlfriend. Evidently, we had played together multiple times whenever it was Dad's weekend, and he was watching Mike, as well as his ex's kids. I remembered the ex's kids, but don't remember Mike at all. We stayed friends for a few years after high school, but life took us separate ways. Story 11. I worked summers as a ticket booth operator at a minor league baseball stadium for around 3 years. The owner was this really nice old guy, mid to late 80s, who always showed up in a wheelchair being walked by his daughter. He always rewarded his employees with bonuses for good work. He even gave me $300 once for helping cash out one of his close childhood friends. One of the final games I worked there, he called me into his owner's box and gave me beer and free food as well as $1,500, just to thank me for all the hard work I did for him over the years. He told me the reason he liked me so much was because I didn't pretend to like him because of who he was. Confused, I asked him to clarify, and he asked me if I seriously didn't know. I was still confused, and then he told me the truth. He was actually a Hall of Fame pitcher who played with the Cleveland Indians and Philadelphia A's from the 1940s to early 1960s, and even served in World War II, and showed me a replica of his Hall of Fame plaque. We laughed about it, and he further insinuated why he liked me so much. He passed away around a year after this, and I attended his funeral. All around an amazing dude, and I feel like such an idiot for not knowing who he was. Story 12. Oh my God, you just reminded me of one. My old flatmate and her fiance broke up, and she came back from break a week early. She gave this whole sob story about him misunderstanding a phone call he eavesdropped on and kicking her out. 2 days later, a guy shows up at our apartment and they spend a few HRs talking quietly. I asked her the next morning, and she said a guy from a class the previous semester was obsessed with her, saw she was single on FB, remembered where she lived from a study group she hosted, and came to ask her out. Turns out she was cheating on her fiancé with him, and when she got caught, she ended things to save face. She told everyone that he was some crazy vet with PTSD that was stalking her. Meanwhile, she had been seeing him on the side while her fiancé paid her tuition. 4 weeks later, before I found this out, she asked me if we could watch her friend's cat for a month. It was his. She tried to get me to lie to her new BF about the cat thing when I finally found out. The only reason I know that she lied was her ex-fiancé sent screen caps of the cheating to her FB contacts. But we weren't friends, so it went to spam until I realized I had a spam folder. She seemed like the nicest person, but was a whole chaotic mess. Story 13. I started therapy a while ago and confided in a friend about my CSA. She confided she has also been side, and it was her by her brother. Plus, he had been living in a house owned by their mom, refusing to pay rent or let her inside. And they had been dealing with legal issues around it for years. They had just gotten him out of the house and out of their lives. I was floored. I had no idea she had been going through any of this. The things people struggle through, and you would never know, because there is so much silence and shame around it. This is someone I'm close to. I respect her strength even more now. Story 14. I had a very close friend growing up from a big family. He was the oldest brother out of 6 kids. I never saw anything wrong, but definitely remember some weird vibes during sleepovers. We lost contact after high school, but during the pandemic reconnected. His family was having a barbecue one day, and I'm sitting with him in his car, hanging out smoking and listening to music. One of his sisters came to the window and made a really overtly sexual joke to him, and he looked over at me like he was seeing if I heard it. He said something like, "You're nasty, get the f*** away from me." And she said, "That never stopped you before." Story 15. Not so much a secret, but news to me. My roommate and I were in the USMC together, and if you aren't married, then you must maintain a barracks room. Most people take that as meaning you have to live in the barracks, but if you show up to field day and keep your room clean, you can't technically get in trouble if you decide you don't want to stay there all the time. My buddy was married at the time, so he had his own house off base, and after getting tired of the barracks life, I started staying at his house more and more, helping out and whatnot. We were definitely friends, always had each other's backs, and had similar humor, really growing close, getting into each other's hobbies. Well, one day, almost out of the blue, his wife leaves him to find herself, which is pretty f***ed as they had a child together. So, Buddy is now single and back in the barracks, almost ready to EAs, basically get out of the USMC, so he lets his now ex-wife have custody for a few months back in their home state so he can get together to presumably work. Out of custody deal. Nothing too notable happens. We have a sending off party for him and he heads back home. I spend another like 6 months to maybe a year still in. I'm pretty bad when it comes to keeping in touch with people, so I figure he probably feels a little betrayed I didn't reach out a whole lot during that time. I get out and move in with my parents. I save quite a bit of money not having a car, mostly living in the barracks and eating at the chow hall, so I take a year off. Spent time with my family, didn't have any friends really, when my buddy starts reaching out. Every few months or so, he'd say stuff like, "There's a really good job here. You wouldn't have to rent a place, you could stay with me." I could stay there rent-free if I looked after his kid. At this point, he had him every other week. Another job opportunity. You should just visit so we can hang out or whatever. I finally think to myself, why not? It seems to me he's either lonely or trying to look out for me. So fly out, see his house, and boom, pandemic shuts down airports and I don't have a car. So basically become a live-in nanny. But it's not so bad, we're having fun and have each other's backs again. One day we get completely wrecked drunk. Happens sometimes, but he tells me something that just shocked me. I am the main benefactor of his will. Here I am thinking we're just good friends, and dude's like, "No, you have the responsibility of making sure that whatever I have is used to help my son live a good life." That hit me right in the feels. Edit, I had been the beneficiary of his will for a few years by the time he told me. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your those in the comment below.